Hey gang, your old pal Clay here, Mountain Music Exchange, and today we are going to have a showdown of the Greenies, the Epiphone Greeny and the Gibson Kirk Hammett Greeny guitars. Let's get started. So before I get really going on this, one thing I want to talk about is I think it's pretty cool the way that Gibson sort of does this trickle down sort of effect that they do with their guitars. So the first Greeny reissue that was released was a $50,000 guitar. You know, of course, that included an experience with meeting Kirk Hammett and a bunch of other cool provenance, cool other things, you know. But nonetheless, it was a $50,000 guitar. The current Gibson Custom Shop Greeny replica, that's not that one, is a $20,000 guitar. So those are pretty much out of the range of affordability for most of us, myself included, and probably especially. But they keep doing it, and they've done this with the Adam Jones, and they're starting to do this even with their custom shop line, the way they work down to the Inspired by Gibson Custom series. Now you can get a Gibson USA Kirk Hammett Greeny, and these retail for about $31.99. And you can also get now an Epiphone version of that guitar with the price of about $14.99. There are some similarities and some differences between these two guitars, and that's really more what I want to talk about today. I'm going to play both of these for you later, and we'll go over that in a bit, but there are things that are on this guitar. This is the Epiphone model here that I'm holding in my hand now. There are some things on this guitar that sort of more closely resemble a Gibson Custom Shop model, and I think that's because they're sort of on the same line of production as the Epiphone Inspired by Gibson Custom, so they have some access to some things maybe that would be more in line with the Gibson Custom Shop model, and we'll talk about those as we go top to bottom on both of these. Now, one thing I do want to say here is this is a lot of guitar for the price that you'll pay for this. Now, I realize there are some people that'll say, oh, $14.99 for an Epiphone, no way. Or, you know, has Epiphone lost their minds? But no, not really. This is a new guitar and a new sort of price point designation for Epiphone. Your standard Epiphone guitars aren't going anywhere. You can still get like the $649, $699 Epiphone Les Pauls. You can still get the customs and all those things for around the same price points you've been seeing those at. But now this is just sort of a step up if you want something that's closer to a custom shop model, has some of the appointments that a custom shop model has, but not necessarily the price point. Now, there are some trade-offs, and we'll talk about that later as well. But ultimately, I think this is a cool avenue for Epiphone to take, especially when you start to consider the price points of competing guitars as they sort of increase. And some of them basically don't offer a whole heck of a lot, except maybe a new pickup combination or a new color to justify those. But Epiphone really has put in a lot of effort to justify why these cost what they do, and we'll get to talking about that later. So first off, what I'm going to do is just go top to bottom the Gibson Greeny. Now, as I go top to bottom on these, so first off, you've got the headstock here, of course. You've got sort of a shallower looking tuner, but ultimately you've got Grovers in the back, and I believe Gibson's Kirk Hammett specific model from the custom shop may have Spurzels. I at least know that Greeny itself has Spurzels in the back, but this one has Grovers with the sort of shallower look to them. You've seen them do this with the Adam Jones guitars and that sort of thing. Nevertheless, it's done the same here. It has the look if you're looking at the front end. Now, on this Gibson model, of course, the first thing you're going to notice is the absence of the Les Paul model here. The reason for that being is it is extremely worn on the original Greeny and also on the custom shop Greenies to the point that it's barely there. So rather than do a sort of a wear and tear version of that, they just decided to opt out of it because it almost looks like it's not there if you're looking at it from a distance anyway. So that's pretty cool. Pretty nice little touch, sort of. Blank truss rod cover, just like you'd find on Greeny. One thing I do like a little bit better about the Epiphone, aside from, of course, the 3-point truss rod cover on that, is the fact that they did use the wide bevel. So that's a more accurate visual representation of what you would find on the custom shop model or what you would find on a 59 reissue, anything like that. Any of those custom shop models, reissue era guitars, you'll see that the bevel is a little wider, and I'm going to display both bevels for you right now so you can take a look. And then going on down, you've got a mahogany neck with a nice rounded profile. This doesn't feel like a very big profile. It doesn't feel as big as I think I expected this to feel as far as roundness. Maybe I'm thinking more along the lines of a 58, but this almost feels, until you get maybe up to the 12th fret, or maybe even a little past 7, this feels very slim at the top and tapers to kind of a bigger profile as you get higher up in the register here and as you get closer to the body. But it feels very good. It's very comfortable. I can get my hand all the way around it, and I have very small hands. So not too shabby. And then of course you've got 22 frets here. You've got, of course, your standard Gibson USA style binding with the fret nibs that go up over the frets. So that means that the binding was put on after the fretwork is done, and that sort of keeps the frets from sprouting out at you or your hands catching on the fretboard. Speaking of fretboard, it does have a rosewood fretboard, which is, of course, sort of standard. It looks really good. Got no complaints with it. It looks and does exactly as it should. The frets feel really comfortable. I don't hear or feel any scratchy noises as I bend the strings across them. The most visually interesting part of this guitar, as we work our way down here, is, of course, the top. And this is a AAA flame maple top. This is not a veneer or anything like that. The top is really, on this example, is gorgeous. Of course, no pickguard included. If you see Kirk playing a Greeny, you'll not see a pickguard on there either, so it makes perfect sense. Another kind of cool visual sort of representation, ABR1 style bridge, but it is not a direct ABR1 as the posts go into bushings rather than directly into the body. On a 59 Les Paul or on Greeny, you will see that the post should go straight into the body on this. I love the burst. It's sort of a lemon burst finish, although I think they call this Greeny burst on both of these. And I will admit that I think I like the burst better on this because it's barely a burst at all, but you can still sort of see barely around the edges as if it's faded over time, which is the case, of course, with its namesake guitar. So I think that's kind of interesting the way that they've done that. And of course, you have the two mismatched knobs here, which I think is pretty interesting as well. It's a nod, another visual nod, which I think is pretty cool. Past that, you kind of have standard Gibson hardware. Everything's chrome here. You have Greeny buckers here. These are a new pickup from Gibson. They sort of course, have the PAF style wind, but the most visually noticeable part is that the neck pickup, rather than the adjustable pole pieces being closer to the neck, now down closer to the bridge pickup, kind of pointed toward the middle of the guitar. This is going to let you get that grainy sound. So when you're in that middle position, you're going to be able to get that sort of out of phase tone that Greeny is famous for without really having to do a lot of tricks, bells and whistles. There's no push-pulls on here or anything like that. It's just the way the guitar is wired itself, which I think is pretty interesting and pretty neat. The binding on here looks really good. And of course, I probably haven't mentioned it yet, but probably should. This guitar is a satin finished guitar. And the reason why it's a satin finished guitar is, again, because Greeny is so worn and so played that it almost has no shine or sheen left to it. So rather than do a full sort of relic job, even if it were something like a template relic or anything like that, to keep the price closer to a Gibson USA standard, you just have sort of a matte finish on this. So it still gives that vibe. If you're on stage or if somebody's looking at you kind of far away, as long as you're not directly up on it, it does give you that vibe of a worn guitar. And as you play it, you'll be able to kind of, your arm will wear here and your arm will kind of oil up the neck a little bit, or your hand rather. And so it's going to get that kind of look. Now, if you want to do a polish on this, you can do sort of a deep polish and bring a little bit more shimmer out to this top, make it more of a sheen than what it is now. One thing I do like about the top, though, is that you can sort of, if you look at it in the light, you can see and you can feel the wood grain of the maple. And you can do that, of course, on the back as well, which we're going to take a look at now. This is a two-piece mahogany body, which is sort of standard for Gibson USA guitars. Les Paul specifically to have a two-piece. Every now and again, you will stumble across a really nice-looking one-piece body from Gibson USA. I will say it is probably exceedingly rare, as I imagine they save nicer one-piece bodies now for the custom shop, so they're going to cost a little more new these days. But wood grain looks really nice. Looks very uniform against itself here, against the two sides. And of course on the back you can feel that as well. You can probably hear my hand on that, and the neck the same. You can see and feel the wood grain. So it's got a very sort of played feel to it, especially on the neck. And on the neck of a really, really well played guitar, you're going to be able to see the wood grain, and you're going to be able to kind of feel as your hand has oiled that up. And I think that's the vibe you're going to get here once you play this guitar a lot and get that kind of worn in. So just some pretty cool stuff here, really. The other electronics, kind of Gibson USA standard stuff, orange drop capacitors, Gibson CTS pots. The switch is very cool here. It's got nothing on the poker chip because, again, the namesake guitar, the treble and rhythm, they're worn away. So this one has nothing to sort of reflect that. You do, however, get the larger Gibson style strap buttons here, the more modern ones. You know, historically accurate or not, when you're actually up and playing this thing, if you are standing and playing, you want this to have a little more surface area for your strap to make contact with. You don't want this to give at any certain point. I mentioned in an earlier video, I was playing a Les Paul style guitar at one point. It was not a Gibson Les Paul, but it gave, and it was almost a disaster, but not quite. But the point is, you don't want this to happen. You just don't. So I'm totally fine with these larger style strap buttons being on here, 100%. So going over to the Epiphone Greeny now. One thing I noticed with this, and it's pretty interesting, and I'll show you a side-by-side comparison here too. The headstock shape is a little bit different. It's not exactly the same as the Gibson USA counterpart, but I think what has happened here is, you know, Epiphone now makes a pretty accurate Gibson style, Gibson 59 style guitar. So with that, you have a slightly more curved headstock on the sides. It's a little bit narrower, and the edges here are just a little rounder. So I think what's happened here is this actually visually, just in its silhouette alone, not when you look at it, of course it's going to say Epiphone on the headstock, and have the 3-point truss rod cover, but in its silhouette alone sort of resembles a 59 Les Paul headstock a little more than the Gibson USA, which again just uses the standard current Gibson USA SG Les Paul headstock, you know. But you also still, again, with these have the sort of shallower style tuners. Then of course as you turn to the back, you have Grovers, which is again fine by me. They work well. They do what they're supposed to. Going on down here, again, we talked about the 3-point truss rod cover. You're still missing the Les Paul silk screen here. You do have an Epiphone mother of pearl inlay. As you have with the Gibson, you have a Gibson mother of pearl inlay. This has the Epiphone. You go on down here, again, you've got 22 frets. The frets are a little narrower on this one. I think that's, again, supposed to be more in line with a 59's actual frets, or perhaps Greeny's actual frets. They don't feel quite the same. Maybe it's something else, but they don't feel quite the same. But again, they do their job. As you run the strings over the frets, you don't hear any scratching or any funny noises, nothing catches, nothing sticks, anything like that. Now you do have an Indian Laurel fretboard here, which I've mentioned before in other videos that it doesn't really bother me. A purist, especially, you know, somebody who's interested in the history of Greeny or interested in the history of the 59 Les Paul may be a little upset by that. Or just a Les Paul enthusiast in general may not love this, but honestly, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, just oil it up. Just use some lemon oil or a fretboard conditioner. It will darken right up. It's porous in a similar way to rosewood. It feels very close to rosewood when you're playing. It's probably going to divot over time after many, many years or decades of playing like rosewood will. And I don't think it's a really big issue other than just that it's a speck on a sheet. But as far as visually, and I'll get you a shot of both of these as well. You can take a look for yourself. Visually, there are some minor differences if you look hard, but it doesn't feel like it's that big of a deal once you kind of get in the groove of playing. One thing I like about this, it's not historically accurate, but I think it's cool. Your inlays are mother of pearl, which is again not accurate to a 59 Les Paul, not accurate to Kirk Hammett's guitar, but it's just a neat addition, just kind of cool that, you know, you're going to pay that much for this Epiphone guitar by Epiphone price standards, of course. So it's cool, you know, you get a nice little touch here. You get some extra bling to go along with that, which I think is pretty neat. Now, the tops on these visually are pretty doggone similar But this top is a veneer. Now, tonally speaking, this guitar does have a full maple top. It is the full thickness, everything that you would expect from a Les Paul. So tonally speaking, that is not going to be an issue. You're going to be able to sound as Les Paul as you can sound with this Epiphone at this price point, right? But the visual part, the flame is a veneer. But that being said, it seems to move in the light really well. I hope you can see this as good as I can see it, and I'll try to get you a closer shot to see if you can see it. But it does move very well, and I like the way it looks. The only hang-up that I sort of have with this is that it's not quite as bursty. As a matter of fact, this one it doesn't particularly have a burst around it all. It's almost more of just an amber finish. It's not necessarily a Greeny burst, whereas you can get burst vibes from the Gibson. You get almost nothing from this. But that's okay. That's not really a huge deal breaker at the end of the day for me, because ultimately this is still going to play and sound like it should. It's still going to look good. This top and the way it moves in the light, even being a veneer, is fantastic. It's very 3D. Greeny buckers here as well. These are the actual Gibson Greeny humbuckers that you find in the Gibson USA model. I also suspect that these are the same ones that you find in the custom shop model as well. So again, you can still do the cool out of phase thing. They still left this cool touch on the poker chip here just under the switch, where your treble or your rhythm and treble are gone after having been worn away by the sands of time and playing and light and abuse, time on the road, all that sort of thing. You do get an ABR1 style bridge here with the wire retainer. Both of these have the wire retainer. But again, this one, like the USA version from Gibson, goes into bushings that are planted already in the body rather than the posts from the bridge going directly into the body. So it is very much ABR1 in style. The width and everything is right there, but it's not quite the same. You also get to adjust these with like a flathead screwdriver, whereas on the Gibson, the adjustment is done with a hex wrench that you'll probably get in the multi-tool. Especially if you buy this new, you'll get that Gibson multi-tool, so you'll be able to adjust that right up. Tailpiece, you still get like the chrome style tailpiece. It's not the fanciest tailpiece I think that Gibson or Epiphone offers, and that's fine. It works, it functions. Another cool thing though that I've noticed here with this is the amber knobs. On a 59, you're more likely to probably have amber knobs as opposed to the gold knobs that are on the others. These look way more accurate to a Gibson 59, or maybe even Gibson's version of the Greeny, Kirk's Greeny, whatever. These look way more accurate, and I like the look set against this amber finish of these amber knobs way better. I think it just, as they sort of contrast with, the color. And then of course, you still get the mismatch knobs, which is the nod you want. Going on the back though, I noticed some differences visually. Before I go on, of course, you've probably already seen it. You could tell for yourself. This one's a satin finish as well. And so with that, you're going to get that kind of feel. But this has like a grain filler in it or something. The top, back, sides, neck. You don't feel the wood grain the same way that you would feel it on the Gibson. So that's something I noticed. That being said, you can still polish this out to some sort of sheen about the same way that you would be able to do with the Gibson. So you can still do with this as you want. On a personal level, I would probably just leave them both satin and let my arm wear do what it's going to do. It's going to wear through that thin nitrocellulose finish in the Gibson a lot faster than this. It may not ever really wear through this polyurethane finish quite the same, but you'll still get kind of a shine. People will kind of know where you've been playing, where you rest your arm and that sort of thing, and that's okay too. But on the back here, I've noticed you still do get a two-piece back, which to be a sort of replica of a Gibson custom shop model may not necessarily be accurate, but for less than half the price of a Gibson USA model, you still get a two-piece mahogany back, one-piece mahogany neck, same as the USA model, same tuners, same pickups, a lot of the same everything here. You're going to get Mallory capacitors with this one, CTS pots, and a Switchcraft switch and jack as well. So one-piece Epiphone neck feels the same here. It does feel bigger, as it feels more like what I presume a 59 neck would feel like. It does have a bigger, more rounded feel to it. It feels the hand up more and probably more evenly all the way up and down the register here as you get closer to the body. The taper doesn't feel quite the same, and I don't really have a problem with that. I actually like the uniformity of it. It does taper, just not quite the same. That's the rundown of both guitars, gang. I think what it's time to do now is take these guitars for a spin. So in doing that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run this through a Line 6 Helix. I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of clean for both. I'm not sure how much of a difference will come through. I'll let you decide. Actually, let me know in the comments below what you guys think about the differences and similarities of these guitars, visually and tonally and price-wise. And tell me if you guys think it's worth it. Just going by feel alone, I feel like I would go for the Gibson one myself, but you know, that's if money were no object. You know, since we live in the real world, money is an object. I don't know, it's not much of a sacrifice to go with the Epiphone Greeny, especially with the Gibson open book headstock now that's on there. Pretty cool stuff. Both, by the way, come with hard shell cases. I'll get a shot of those for you guys too. The Epiphone comes with a sort of Lifton style case, brown with a super bright pink interior. And as far as the feel goes, there are some differences in the feel of the case. The Gibson case feels a little sturdier. It's the standard USA brown case with a slightly darker, sort of fuzzier pink interior on the inside. And it comes with a little more swag. The Epiphone comes with, as far as swag extras, case candy, comes with like stickers and things. Mostly just tags, stickers, that sort of thing. The Gibson, however, does come with like a strap, multi-tool. So it comes with some useful items you can actually put to use outside of just, display purposes, showing off, bragging rights, whatever. I use my Gibson multi-tool religiously, by the way. Okay, I digress. I apologize, gang. Back to the sounds of the guitars. So what I'm going to do is run this through Line 6 Helix. I'm going to give you as much clean as I think needs to be attained to sort of make the point of what these guitars both sound like clean. I'm gonna probably spend most of the time with these guitars sort of in that sort of mid to high gain, mid gain-ish, sort of cranked Marshall-ish territory. So I'm gonna be using the US Princess for clean. I'm gonna be using the Brit 2203 inside of the Helix here for most of the sounds that we're gonna hear. I think that's gonna give you a lot more of the dynamic range of the Greeny Buckers and what they both are gonna sound like. And then of course, because inside of me are two wolves, and one's a Gibson nerd and one's a Metallica nerd, they get to clash. And I'm gonna, of course, kick on the overdrive on that, play a few Metallica tunes with both, just so you kind of get an idea. It's Kirk Hammett. How could I not, right? So without further ado, gang, let's get started. Let's hear what they sound like. Okay, gang, so that's both the guitars. That is the Gibson Greeny and the Epiphone Greeny. I think as far as playability and feel goes, now, these are both set up as they are out of the box. We've not tweaked them. We've not done anything with them. Right out of the box, I think the Gibson Greeny plays like a guitar that I would set up with incredibly low action, a straight neck. I realize they may not all do that, but with these two guitars, this one does. I think I would have to just give the overall vibe. I like the burst. I like the playability. I like the feel of the wood grain all the way around the guitar. when I'm playing. I think it just sort of adds sort of an element to, sort of an earthy, woody element to the feel when you're playing the guitars both, right? So I think I would have to pick this one based on that. But if your price point is not $3,200 and your price point is something closer to $1,500, and you really are either a Kirk Hammett fan, a fan of Gibson history, a fan of Greeny specifically, or 59 Les Paul, or you want that out-of-phase sound without all the push-pull tricks in a hand-wired guitar with quality parts, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the Epiphone at all. You get as much guitar, I think, for that price point as you could possibly get with the hardshell case, all the fixings, the Gibson USA pickups, CTS pots, Mallory caps, everything. So, you know, I think if I just had to pick blindly and pick one, I'm going to pick this one. But you cannot go wrong with the Epiphone Greeny. It is a very, very rockin' cool tribute from the Inspired by Gibson custom line to Greeny and Kirk Hammett's example. And I think it's just a cool guitar. Both guitars are really cool, but I'm going to quit yammering on about them now. Check us out at mountainmusicexchange.com. Check out that new arrival section for all the latest new and used gear that comes into the store. If it's on the website, it's in stock in the store. So if you see it, we have it. Check it out. Check us out, of course, on Facebook. Check out Hoss on TikTok, and check out Hoss on the YouTube shorts here as well. And gang, I think that's going to have us on this one. And if you like what you've seen today, and you like the comparison videos, you like any of the other guitar spotlight videos that we've done, any of the how-to videos, gift videos, anything like that, I hope you'll consider giving us a like and a subscribe. It would really mean a lot to kind of help keep the channel going and hopefully growing. That would be cool. But either way, thank you guys a ton for just watching. We appreciate you all out there. I'm Clay. You rock. Have a good one.